The night my family tried to erase me didn't happen at a graduation. It happened at something far more personal, my architectural showcase. The first time in my life my work would be displayed publicly. A milestone I had dreamed of since childhood. I remember stepping onto the mezzanine of the event hall, heart thudding, surrounded by scale models, soft music, and the low murmur of guests drifting through exhibitions. My name was printed on every brochure. My designs filled the central gallery, and yet all I could think about was the message I'd received from my mother an hour before I arrived. We need to talk after the showcase. It's important. Don't make a scene. Those 5 words had been the soundtrack of my whole childhood. Don't make a scene. Before we go deeper, if this story touches something inside you, if you've ever been the overlooked sibling or the one who carried the weight quietly, please like this video and subscribe. It means so much more than you know. And tell me your name and the city you're watching from. I'd love to know where your story is being heard. My name is Janelle Armitage, and for most of my life, I was the daughter people forgot to look at twice. My parents, Roland and Marissa, adored the image of family perfection. Sunday brunches, polished photos, coordinated holiday outfits. My younger brother Colton was the star of every spotlight they manufactured. Charming, musical, endlessly praised even when he did nothing remarkable. I was the opposite, quiet, analytical, drawn to drafting tables and unglamorous hours spent building structures out of foam board and resin. I grew up understanding that attention had to be earned, but silence was expected. Still, I hoped tonight would be different. Maybe for once my parents would be proud. Maybe they'd tell me I mattered. But hope has a cruel sense of timing. When the event ended, guests began filtering out, leaving the hall's warm lights dimming against the polished floor. I was gathering my portfolio when Roland appeared beside me, wearing the expression he usually reserved for bad news and bank statements. "We'll talk in the atrium," he said. Not a question, not a suggestion, a command. Marissa and Colton were already waiting there. They looked strangely triumphant, as if they'd already decided how the night should end. I approached cautiously. "What's going on?" Marissa held a folder to her chest like a shield. "We're not doing this inside the exhibition hall. You've already had enough attention." That sentence stung in a way I wasn't prepared for. Colton glanced at me with the smugness of someone who'd been told a secret meant to hurt me. "Let's just get this over with," he muttered. Roland exhaled heavily, as if my existence burdened him. "You know your uncle's clinic loan? The one you co-signed last year?" My heart dropped. "Yes, what about it?" He straightened the sleeve of his blazer, avoiding my eyes. "Your brother needed a place to live while he focuses on music school. He used your credit to rent an apartment in your name, without telling you." My breath caught. "What?" Colton shrugged, leaning back against the marble column like the world owed him comfort. "Relax. It's temporary. Temporary. As if financial identity theft was a small inconvenience. I stared at him, the realization crashing in waves. "You use my credit without asking, without telling me." Marissa sighed in that rehearsed tone she used whenever responsibility needed to be avoided. He couldn't qualify on his own. The landlord needed someone stable. Stable. A word they only applied to me when they wanted something. Roland continued, "The lease, deposits, and utilities are all under your name. It's easier that way." My voice cracked. "You didn't think about the consequences." "Of course we did," he said calmly. "We decided you can handle them." "We decided." Not I. Not she. We. As if my life belonged to a committee. I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. "This is fraud." Marissa rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic, Janelle. It's family." That word again, weaponized, polished, thrown like a stone. Colton smiled at me like He had won something I didn't know we were competing for. You'll survive. It's not like you have much going on outside your little building projects. Something inside me snapped, so quietly it felt like a breath instead of a break. Not rage, not panic, just clarity. You're fixing this, I whispered. Roland's jaw tightened. No, you are. You'll keep paying the rent until Colton gets on his feet. We're not discussing it further. I looked between the three of them, the pride, the entitlement, the absolute lack of remorse. And something became painfully clear. They didn't see me as a daughter, not even as a person, just a resource, a buffer, a safety net stretched thin beneath their selfishness. Still, I kept my voice calm. What if I refuse? Marissa's expression sharpened. Then we'll simply remind your lender that you willingly took responsibility for the lease. Do you want your reputation damaged over stubbornness? Colton smirked. Just be useful for once, sis. There it was. Not anger, not hurt, just final confirmation of the truth I had spent my whole life avoiding. I exhaled, steady and cold. Okay, I said softly. If that's how you want to do this, then let's do it your way. Roland nodded, relieved. Good. I knew you'd cooperate once you stopped overreacting. But I wasn't cooperating, and I wasn't overreacting. I was planning, because what they didn't know, what they never bothered to notice, was that I had spent the last year gathering financial records, legal documents, and digital evidence of every time my family used my credit, my accounts, or my work without consent. Not for revenge, for survival. And next week, when they walked into the bank meeting they thought was about refinancing Colton's apartment, they would finally learn they had just burned the wrong bridge. I didn't sleep the night after the showcase. I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my small studio apartment, ironically the only space in my life that truly belonged to me, while my mind replayed every word my family had thrown at me in the Atrium. Not because of the betrayal itself, but because of how effortlessly they expected me to accept it. Like it was natural, like it was my duty, like caring for their mistakes was already written somewhere in the family rulebook I was never allowed to edit. By sunrise, something inside me had shifted so deeply it felt like my bones had rearranged themselves. The girl who always nodded, stayed quiet, and carried burdens in silence. She didn't survive the night. In her place stood someone who had finally stopped trying to earn a seat at a table that was never built for her. But revenge needed patience, not rage, not impulsiveness, patience. And that was something I had perfected long before they realized. 3 days later, I invited them to my studio under the pretense of clearing the air. I knew they wouldn't come for peace. They came because they wanted assurance that I would keep covering my brother's rent. The setting was small, intentionally so. No fancy atrium, no marble flooring, no grand hallway echoing with their importance. Just 4 walls, a work table crowded with blueprints, and the smell of coffee I had brewed out of politeness rather than desire. Their presence felt too large for my space. They carried entitlement, like it was tailored into their clothes. My mother was the first to speak. Let's make this quick. Janelle, I have appointments today. I gestured to the table. Sit. Roland frowned at my tone. He wasn't used to being told anything, but they sat anyway. Colton sprawled lazily, tapping his foot, scrolling his phone. So, you're covering next month, right? No, I said. 3 faces snapped toward me. Marissa narrowed her eyes. Don't start. I'm not starting anything, I replied calmly. I'm ending it. Roland leaned forward, voice low, threatening in the way only a man who believes he holds authority can sound. You don't get to end obligations you agreed to. I placed a document on the table, an itemized record of every unauthorized account, rental, and credit inquiry linked to my name. Their names attached, their signatures forged. Their transactions documented. Colton scoffed. What is this? Evidence, I said. Enough to prove identity misuse. Financial exploitation. Fraud. Marissa laughed. Short, brittle. Oh, don't be ridiculous. I met her gaze with a steadiness that startled her. This isn't a negotiation anymore. I've already spoken to my lender, the leasing office, and a financial attorney. Roland's face drained of color. You did what? I explained the situation. I continued, keeping my voice calm, almost gentle. They were very interested in how my credit was used without my permission, especially since I have email records, timestamps, and a recorded phone call from last month where you two discussed using my credit because it's reliable. Colton's jaw dropped. You recorded us. You taught me not to trust you. I finally listened. The silence that followed was thick and ugly. My tiny studio suddenly felt cavernous with all the space their shock created. Marissa regained her composure first. What exactly are you planning to do with this? I slid another paper forward, an official dispute form and legal notice. I am removing myself from the lease. Completely. Today. Colton shot up from his chair. You can't do that. I'll get kicked out. I didn't flinch. Yes. Roland's voice cracked with outrage. Do you understand what happens if this becomes official? It'll ruin our credit history. It'll affect our assets. Not my problem, I said, and it felt like stepping out of chains. They stared at me, stunned, unable to comprehend that I wasn't bending. Not this time. Colton's voice rose, panicked. So that's it? You're just going to leave me homeless? You should have thought of that before using someone else's identity. I replied. His face twisted. You're doing this because you're jealous. You can't stand that I'm the one with real talent. Talent? My voice didn't rise, but something in it made him stop. You used my credit because you couldn't qualify for a basic rental. You needed me to survive. He fell silent. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not anger. Fear. Marissa slammed her palm on the table. You ungrateful girl. After everything we've done for you. I leaned forward. Everything you've done to me. She froze. Roland ground his teeth. What do you want, Janelle? There it was, the question they should have asked years ago. But now, I didn't need validation. I needed closure. I want space, I said. Distance. Freedom. And my identity back. Colton muttered a curse under his breath. I ignored him and continued. I'm filing the removal today. The leasing office has already approved. The damages, unpaid utilities, and balances will revert to the signer who benefited from them. His eyes widened. You're ruining my life. No, I whispered. I'm letting you build yours without climbing on top of mine. Marissa stood abruptly and grabbed her purse. This isn't over. It is for me, I said quietly. Roland glared, pointing a trembling finger. You think you're so mature. Just wait. You'll meet us one day. I opened the door. Maybe, but not today. They left in a storm of anger and disbelief, but the moment the door closed, my apartment fell silent in a way I had never heard before. Not empty, not lonely, just peaceful. Reclaiming your life doesn't come with applause. It comes with quiet. And in that quiet, I realized something else. Ending the lease was just step one. There were deeper wounds to expose, deeper truths to reveal, because I had discovered something in the legal documents, something my family didn't know I knew, something that would change everything about our past, about our inheritance, and about why they were so desperate to use my name. When the door shut behind them, I thought the shaking in my hands would stop. It didn't. Not because I regretted what I'd done, but because I knew the next step would cut even deeper. The lease was only the beginning. The real damage had been hiding in my family's financial shadows for years. And I finally had the documents to prove it. It started 2 weeks earlier when I went digging for the clinic loan papers my uncle had left me. While cross-checking signatures, dates, and accounts, I found something my parents clearly never intended for me to see: a secondary life insurance policy. One issued in my name, but owned illegally by my parents. They weren't just using my credit, they were using my identity as financial collateral. And the worst part, Colton wasn't just benefiting from my credit. His tuition had been partly paid from a temporary loan taken using my Social Security number. All behind my back, all documented, all illegal. I didn't know whether to cry or scream, so I did neither. I just stared at the papers in disbelief, wondering how many years they'd planned to keep secret. How long they expected me to remain the silent mule carrying the family's debts so Colton could live like a crowned prince. That's when the idea formed. Not revenge. No, revelation. People like my parents feared only one thing: the truth coming to light. So I decided to shine a light bright enough to burn. The confrontation happened exactly 1 week after they stormed out of my studio. They didn't know I had already requested a formal mediation with the Financial Oversight Board, the clinic estate attorney, and the bank officer who handled my uncle's accounts. They didn't know I had copies of every signature they forged. They didn't know the lawyer I consulted specialized in familial financial exploitation. All they knew was that I had requested a meeting. They assumed it was to apologize, to fix things for them, to fall back in line. They arrived at the conference room wearing the exact smug faces I expected. Roland took the seat at the head of the table, as though the room belonged to him. Marissa crossed her arms tight, already prepared to be disappointed in me. Colton slouched with headphones around his neck, bored and irritated. "What now?" he muttered. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the folder. Inside were the identity theft documents, the forged loan application, the illegal insurance policy, and the withdrawal logs from my uncle's clinic fund, taken after his death, using my compromised credentials. The attorney overseeing the meeting cleared her throat. "Mr. and Mrs. Armitage, your daughter has brought forward serious concerns regarding unauthorized financial activity." Colton's head snapped up. Roland's fingers tightened around his pen. Marissa's expression flickered just for a second, into fear. I spoke before they could twist the narrative. "All of this," I said softly, "is what you did under my name." Marissa forced a smile. "Sweetheart, you're mistaken. I'm not." My voice didn't tremble. For the first time in my life, it didn't tremble. The attorney slid the evidence toward them. These documents show multiple patterns of fraudulent activity. Roland's jaw clenched. We're her parents. We had the right to make decisions on her behalf. "You lost that right," the attorney said calmly, "the day she turned 18. Colton shot to his feet. "She's ruining us." I exhaled slowly. "No, I'm uncovering the damage you tried to hide." Roland turned to me, fury twisting his features. "If you do this, if you push forward, we will lose everything. You should have thought of that before using me like a financial tool." I replied. Marissa slammed the table, eyes blazing. "After everything we did for you, Janelle," I cut her off. "Everything you did to me." The attorney raised a hand. "We can proceed in 2 ways. A formal fraud investigation, a mediated agreement where the parents assume all financial responsibility and release the daughter from every document signed under her name." Roland finally understood that I wasn't bluffing. His face broke into something almost pitiful, fear wearing the mask of authority cracking open. "We choose option 2, he said hoarsely. Colton looked betrayed. "Dad, you're just going to let her win." Roland didn't look at him. "It's too late. She already has the evidence." The shift in their faces, the collapse of entitlement, the crumbling of control, it didn't make me joyous. It didn't make me triumphant. It just made me free. For the first time in my life, I watched them scramble to clean up their messes, not mine. I watched them sign the legal release. I watched them agree to repay the debts they created. I watched the entire foundation of their power over me dismantle in less than an hour. When it was over, the attorney closed her folder. You're no longer tied to their financial history, Ms. Armitage. You're clear. Clear. A word I had never felt apply to me until that moment. My parents stood. Colton glared at me like I'd stolen his birthright. Marissa wouldn't look me in the eye. Roland spoke the last words he would ever say to me. You turned your back on your family. I met his gaze calmly. No, I stopped letting my family turn their back on me. They walked out of the room in silence, in defeat, in disbelief. And I didn't follow. I walked home that evening under a sky turning dark blue, the kind that makes the world feel both heavy and open at the same time. I thought I'd feel empty without them. But what I felt was something unfamiliar, something warm and terrifying and beautiful, self-worth. I didn't rebuild my life overnight. I didn't suddenly become healed or invincible. But I took the first step toward a life where my identity, legal, emotional, and personal, belonged only to me. And if you're listening to my story right now, I want to leave you with this. Sometimes choosing yourself isn't selfish. Sometimes it's survival. And sometimes it's the bravest thing you'll ever do. Thank you for listening. If you felt this story in your chest, if it echoed anything you've lived through, please like the video. It helps more than you think. And tell me your name and the city you're watching from. I'd love to know where your story meets mine. And if you want more stories of breaking cycles and reclaiming your life, subscribe. You deserve to hear voices that remind you you're not alone.